Hey, good morning. Good morning, students, teachers. I'm back to watching Shuffle Dance. Now, you're probably not here for me talking about Shuffle Dance. You're more into what we call the concentric hierarchy, perhaps. Let me mute this. And this is just a commercial. I'll come back to this. This is a subculture. You could call it a cult. I use the word subculture interchangeably with cult. The cult only means it has enough momentum to be recognizable, but it's still pretty small. Like once you get past a certain size, it sounds abnormal to call it a cult. Like if it's a huge church, but even there, the Twilight Zone, right? How we use language varies from person to person, from channel to channel. Consensus is elusive. So this is a promo for a Martian math video. One of my themes in this short video is going to be spin on the word Martian and Mars and stuff like that. And finally now, it didn't take long actually, we have the YouTube version of this interview with Mike Achera, who's the inventor with his wife of the Lux blocks, which I use in some of my curriculum actually. It also just sits out in my sculpture garden where plastic is a theme. I know that my friend Craig was rather reluctant to take any C60 that time because he's not a big plastic fan. I think I finally figured out that it's okay to say Siobhan for this spelling, Siobhan. I think I saw a TikTok. I've been watching TikTok, shuffle dance. Sounds very like I'm tuning out, but it's not so. I'm tuning in. This is a time when there's a lot of violence in the Middle East. The concepts of sovereignty, what nations mean, what are nations. You can't just rely on the circuitry to maintain itself. It requires continual revisiting just to keep the culture alive. So I went to Woodrow Wilson School for some time inside of Princeton, and they've changed the name. And I didn't like become the citizen diplomat that I wanted to be necessarily with the title, working for the State Department or something. But I am interested in citizen diplomacy. And on many a diplomat shelf, like cultural attache or something, you might find this book back in the 80s, let's say. And it seemed kind of okay, I think, because you've got all this Applewhite CIA stuff, right? Which is a topic here on this channel. We've gone into Bucky's OSS connections also, right? They both lived a long time and saw a lot. They're both highly intelligent. It's not surprising to me that they would sort of converge in DC at the time, right? So, speaking of Applewhite, he went on to write this book towards the end of his career. I mean, retired from the CIA long before this. He corrected me once. I said something like he got out under Nixon, but he said no, Helms. Like he served under Helms, and then he was out, is what I think. But you can double check. Uh, and he knew by correspondence, at least. I don't know if he met Istvan Hargitay, but Istvan Hargitay is the author of this book, which is called, now here's the spin on Mars, The Martians of Science. And really, what it's about is some really smart Hungarians. And I understand that culture has a lot to offer, always has. And so, John von Neumann, um, each chapter is perhaps about a different Martian, as he calls them. Edward Teller. I heard Edward Teller talk at Princeton. There was a lot of hissing in the audience because Princeton has that as a tradition. They tend to hiss. Now we've been staring at S module stuff and my head and so forth. I just wanted to bring you up to date. This is kind of a philosophy blog, right? So Richard Rorty at Princeton, when I was going to Woodrow Wilson School, which is at Princeton, I was being pushed to choose. Do I want to go into diplomacy, international relations, or do I want to like go back overseas where I came from, or do I want to do something more like psychoanalysis because I grew up really admiring Freud and all that. It was big at the time, right? Me growing up in the '60s, it's like The Chosen. Remember that book? So here I call it riffing on Rorty, who was one of my professors, and this picks up from a conversation we're having on one of the listservs in our culture, subculture. We're talking about this, that, and the other. Most recently, we've gotten into Est and the Est people, and the book called Est, a steeringman's handbook. I haven't read it, okay, but it's been a topic. But before that, I was diving into Rorty's book, Achieving Our Country, and I think I'll leave it. I'll put this link to this blog post in the writing. I think that's what we're up to in our philosophy curriculum a lot, is taking, say, a nationalistic approach or manifesto, you could say, in the form of this book by Rorty. It's really just a couple lectures turned into a book. It's quite short. You can read it free online. Archive.org lets you check it out for 14 days. So you read that, and then you look at Grunch of Giants and think about the continuity, actually. I see more continuity than discontinuity, even if we're kind of looking in the rearview mirror in a lot of ways on our previous history. That just goes with the territory. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't see a huge discontinuity between Grunch of Giants and Achieving Our Country. And that's an interesting thought, I think. All right. Remember, Martians? Isfahan went on to, or I think earlier maybe wrote this book with his wife, Symmetry. And this copy came to me from Ed Applewhite. He sent this out, copies of this book, to some of his associates, friends, because we're all in this work with synergetics, right? That's what this channel is about. What I showed you here, this book, and the first book I showed you where I talked about Siobhan as okay pronunciation for the author's first name. This book gives some of the history of how these two guys, Donald Coxeter and our Buckminster Fuller, how they connect, right? Some of the overlapping stories, because they do connect. Actually, this book is dedicated to this gentleman here. With permission. Didn't take him by surprise. The guys, they had a, interesting collaboration. All right, so let's talk again in the near future.